movie has slashed her tires and has made threatening comments.
The attendance at Star Wars has been almost astronomical. Queues are still forming.
For a lot of kids, walking out of seeing Star Wars in 1977 was more than just seeing a new movie. We saw something for the first time that really transported us into a whole new world. One of those many kids that felt Star Wars was more than just a movie was Lee Marx, who saw the film at 10 years old. Lee was what a lot of people thought about when they thought about fans of science fiction. He was a little shy, quiet, smart, and a bit of a loner. He was from a broken home in Kansas City where he lived with his father and had little contact with his mother. Also at home was Lee's younger brother Jimmy, who Lee looked out for and protected. For Lee, like many others, Star Wars was an escape and a dream that life could be better. Not just for a farm boy orphan like Luke Skywalker, it also proved that one that had dreams of writing science fiction, making model ships, creating films like Star Wars, dreams could come true. It was clear the movie had an impact on Lee, and soon he found himself buying not just Star Wars merchandise, but he also became a movie collector, buying up movie-related t-shirts, posters, press kits, anything from his favorite film he'd get his hands on. In the summer of 1978, Lee called his local theater to try to get some movie posters. Answering the phone at the theater was 16-year-old Ralph Cochran. Ralph Cochran was also a fan of film, and the one he loved the most, like Lee, was Star Wars. He was also a movie collector, buying and trading posters at swap meets, trading movie scripts with other movie fans. Going to film conventions, Ralph was able to make a good list of contacts from the movie industry. One of those contacts was even Star Wars actor Anthony Daniels. Lee looked up to Ralph. He was like the older brother he never had, and most of all, he had a friend that was a lot like him. Both of them had big dreams of making movies like the ones they loved. The two hit it off almost from the start and became best friends. Over the next few years, it was almost impossible to see one without the other one by his side. They would go see the latest movies together, attend film conventions, and talk about movies all night. It seemed like a normal friendship, but within just a few years, one of them would have their dreams crushed as the other would lose his life. Thanks to Ralph's contacts within the film industry, the boys were able to grow their collection of movie collectibles. Lee would use all his allowance money, or any money that he could work up, to give to his best friend, who would then buy up movie props and scripts to upcoming films and some from their favorite past movies. These were small collectibles, and according to Ralph, they needed to up their game. If they were going to get good movie props and meet people higher up in the film industry, they needed to have more to trade than just petty cash. They needed film reels. And with Ralph's job at the local theater, he had plans to get them. He would have Lee sneak into the projector's booth after the last movie as the employees were closing up. Ralph would often take these stolen film reels to secret meetings to sell and trade with serious movie collectors. As for Lee, he wasn't allowed to attend the meetings with the serious collectors because he hadn't proven himself yet. Ralph would return with insider news, movie props, and wild tales of violent encounters and ties with the mob. Lee was kind of happy that he wasn't allowed to meet these people after some of the stories he heard. Finally, in 1982, all the hard work had paid off. Ralph returned from one of his secret meetings with great news. He attained an apprenticeship with Lucasfilm. This was a big step not only into the movie industry, but a huge step into making the film series they love, Star Wars. It was a dream come true for Ralph, but best friends never forget their friends. With the help of Ralph, Lee had an inside track to George Lucas and the Lucasfilm crew, who were starting production on the third Star Wars film, Revenge of the Jedi, and they needed help. Lee couldn't believe it. He felt like Luke Skywalker. The boy that dreamed big was finally seeing those dreams become a reality. Lee spent hours and hours in his bedroom writing up story ideas, drawing detailed schematics for Lucasfilm, All he had to do was pay an agent fee to his best friend Ralph, who would then pass him on to George Lucas himself. It seems the hard work was really starting to pay off, as a letter from Star Wars creator George Lucas showed up in Lee's mailbox in October 1984. The letter praised Lee for all his hard work, told Lee how impressed Lucas was of his drawings and ideas, and how he worked a lot faster than his Lucasfilm employees. In another letter from George Lucas, dated December 1982, Lucas wanted to know when Lee would be able to come out and start working officially for Lucasfilm, and when the two could finally meet up and shoot the bull. Lee couldn't believe it. He was getting letters from the man that changed his life just a few years ago with the release of Star Wars. He sat down to reply back to his new boss. In the letter, Lee thanked him for his letter, joked about how he hoped E.T. didn't beat Star Wars at the box office, and told Lucas that he did plan to fly to California in the summer of 1983. He also included designs for a new rebel base that he was sure Lucas and his team would love. Lee and his best friend Ralph took a break from working on the next Star Wars film to enjoy the release of the latest one, now named Return of the Jedi. Finally, the movie the two had been waiting 3 years for, and the one that Lee had been working hard helping Lucas make, was here. As the lights in the theater dimmed, the movie started up, and Lee finally saw some of his hard work pay off. Lee was amazed to see a shuttlecraft and weapons that were similar to the designs he had sent Lucasfilm. Ralph also let him know that a bomb that Han Solo plants on the Imperial shield base had Lee's name inscribed on it as a thank you from George Lucas. Leaving the film, Lee was on a high, not just from seeing the latest Star Wars movie, but feeling he was now part of Star Wars. Exiting the theater, the two saw a limousine. Sitting in the back was George Lucas himself, who waved at the two before driving off. It was clear to Lee he had spent over $5,000 in the last 4 years, sending Ralph his lunch money, money he earned from a part-time job, and at times taking his dad's credit card. This was called paying his dues, and it was paying off. The biggest dream of a young 16-year-old science fiction fan was not just seeing their work in a Star Wars film, but to see theirself in a Star Wars film. George Lucas needed a teenage boy to play Luke Skywalker's son in the next Star Wars movie. And according to Ralph, Lucas wanted Lee. So the two put together an audition tape and sent it off to Lucasfilm. Seeing your work on the screen is one thing, but now maybe Lee could see himself as the star of his own Star Wars movie. Life was great and everything was going as Lee had dreamed. Just a few days later, he would even get a phone call from George Lucas telling him that he was excited about the audition tape and looked forward to meeting him very soon. For a lonely young 16-year-old boy in Kansas City, it was a dream come true.
6201, I'll be en route in about 60 seconds from Senior Center. First Navy plate.
On August 27, 1983, Ralph Cochran was found laying in the grass next to his Chevy with the license plate that read Jedi. He had been stabbed more than 35 times with a butcher knife. Also found at the scene was Lee's younger brother Jimmy, and even Lee himself. In an interview with police, both boys confessed to killing Ralph with a butcher knife. Police said Lee showed no remorse and believed Ralph would magically return soon, much like a Jedi Knight. How could this turn so tragic? Why would a young teenager who was seeing his dreams come true take the life of his best friend? Ralph had quit his theater job in 1983 and was now working at a local Taco Bell. There he made a lot of new friends and found a lot of trust with them. So much trust with his new co-workers that he started to bragging about how he had been fooling his best friend, Lee, making him think he was working for Lucasfilm. How he even hired a guy with a fake beard to wait from a limousine. How he wrote letters to Lee as George Lucas. The co-workers laughed along with Ralph and also helped him call Lee, acting like George Lucas. A few days before August 27th, Ralph and his shift manager would have a disagreement and things got heated between the two. The shift manager exposed to Lee that he had been the butt of a long, expensive joke. Lee was shocked, hurt, and confused. Could it all have been a lie? Could his best friend in the world, someone like a brother to him, Could he have been fooling him for the last 4 years? Lee was upset and outraged and came up with a plan to get even. But he needed help. Arriving back home, Lee let his younger brother Jimmy know that Ralph wasn't the friend they all thought he was and that he was planning to kill their father. The two headed to Ralph's home at 2 a.m. and found him sitting in his car. There, Lee and his little brother would pull Ralph from his car as Lee stabbed him to death with a butcher knife he took from his house. As investigators searched Lee's room for more clues as to what set him off, they were shocked at the quality of Lee's writing, drawings, and storyboards. They were so impressed with what they were reading, they contacted Lucasfilm himself to make sure he wasn't working for them. Lucasfilm told the investigators they never heard of Lee. Ralph Cochran was laid to rest a few days later, dressed in a Return of the Jedi t-shirt as the John Williams theme music played. Jimmy, the 13-year-old little brother, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, where he would have his case reviewed every 4 months. As for Lee, he pled guilty to second-degree murder. He was sent to the state hospital and had to remain under their care until doctors declared he was cured. He was diagnosed with paranoid personal disorder and was extremely immature for his age, although doctors said he had a very high IQ. From his hospital cell, he would spend his time doing what he loved doing the most, writing science fiction. He wrote a book called The Lost Tomorrow that workers at the hospital said they couldn't put down. In 1987, Lee was moved from the state mental hospital to stand trial for murder. There he pled guilty for second-degree murder and was sent back to the state mental hospital. In 1989, after 6 years, Lee was released from the mental state hospital and placed on probation. This is an extreme case of a joke that went really too far, and sadly had a tragic ending for 3 young men.
Junkman.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.